Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Fred Moskowitz. He helps people build wealth through alternative investments such as real estate and mortgage notes. He's also author of the book, The Little Green Book of Note Investing. He started off as an engineer, though, so I'm really interested to learn more about what made him transition away from engineering, his motivation to become self-employed, and the ways public speaking has benefited him along the way. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Fred.
Thank you, Neil. It's great to be here.
So, first question, where did your interest in engineering come from?
It was lifelong, lifelong. I always had a good mechanical ability as a child, loved all kinds of toys that involved putting things together and taking them apart or building. I always loved that. And as I got older, um, computers started to really come about and be more in the forefront. And so I took a huge interest in computers. And so I grew up with that. And it was during the early days when the first Apple computers came out that were available for consumers. And they were computers in general were generally affordable. It was no longer something that took up an entire floor of a building, right? Like the early days. So I took an interest in computers and went on to study computer engineering and got my degree in that. And so that was my whole evolution. It was a real exciting time because when I finished university, it was a couple years later, it was the beginning of the dot-com boom and the birth of the internet. And so that was the career environment that I was stepping into, which was really taking off.
Nice. What kind of work did you do working as an engineer?
I did a lot of work around um, industrial controls, was interested in robotics, so that was a natural area for me. And then I worked in the semiconductor industry. Spent a lot of time working in the cable television industry, all around video transmission, video streaming. Today, video streaming is done all over the internet, but uh, the earlier iteration of that, it was done over coaxial cable through cable television. And so that was the first uh, appearance of video streaming where it was really available to the general public.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the intro that you started off as an engineer, but then you transitioned into what you're currently doing now. So, what was the
Yes.
motivation to make that change?
Yeah, this is really interesting. What happened to me, Neil, was, as I mentioned earlier, I started working during the dot-com boom, the birth of the internet. And I spent many years working at different tech companies, startup companies, and I loved the work. It was super exciting, but I also learned that it was a wild roller coaster ride. And uh, companies would ramp up quickly and grow. And then after that, the economy would turn and it would be the opposite of that. Companies would go under or cutting back employees. And so what I learned, right, was that no matter how good of an engineer I was or how valuable of an employee I was, that I could quickly lose my job through no fault of my own. It was just the nature of the tech industry. It's very cyclical. And so this made me realize that I was taking a huge risk because the only income I had was my paycheck from my job, and I was relying on that financially. And so I said, this is a huge risk. And so I started out to diversify that and say, what can I do to generate other sources of income? And so with that, I turned to alternative investments. I got interested in investments and I started doing that on the side. I started purchasing real estate, building a rental portfolio. After a number of years, I started with mortgage notes, buying and owning mortgage notes that generated income for me, and was doing that over time. And eventually I got to a place where my income was very diversified, was coming in from multiple sources. And the investment income, it came to a point where one day I realized I was making enough income from my investments to cover all my living expenses. And the fascinating thing was that it caused a huge mindset shift for me because I said, now I'm working in engineering because I want to and not because I have to, because it was like I didn't need the money anymore. And so that really changed my perspective. Moving ahead, years after that, the investment space, it just kept growing and growing. And eventually I ventured out into entrepreneurship and have been focusing on that for quite a number of years. Being actively involved in the investment space, doing a lot of teaching and education to others, especially my colleagues in the engineering world, where I found that many people, the only investments they had was their 401k at work, and that's it. And that's great. 401k is a great benefit from your employer. Definitely take advantage of that. But if that's the only thing you have, the reality is you're 100% invested in the stock market. And that also experiences wild swings. And so I really like to teach about and share about diversification, where have some investments that are outside of Wall Street, buy some assets, own assets that generate income for you, and create more financial stability in your life. Because let's face it, that's something that everyone can use a little more of.
That's a really cool story. I mean, I think you're right about that. I know when I worked as an engineer, I believe the only investment I had really was in my 401k as well. But it wasn't until maybe I left that I thought about, well, maybe there's no more 401k if I'm not going to be working at this company anymore. So it's important for me to more diversify, where I invest my money. So who knows what I would have ended up doing if I had stayed an engineer. Maybe we would all would still been in a 401k. I guess we'll never know, I suppose. So with the work that you do, who do you said you typically work with engineers? Are these engineers that are still working in corporate America and want to diversify where they put their money, or do you work with former engineers, kind of like ourselves?
All of the above, all of the above. I find that my story is very relatable to people that have a similar background than I do. And so it tends to attract a lot of engineers. I've even started an online community for engineers and tech professionals that are interested in investing. And so, Neil, it's not exclusive that that's who I serve, that's the audience, but it tends to attract that. And it's really interesting how that is. But, a big part of speaking and storytelling is when you share about yourself, someone in the audience is listening and they say, hey, that sounds just like me. And then you become very relatable. It resonates in at a deeper level, and people become interested. And this is something that happens naturally. As a speaker, as a communicator, if you work on the skill of oratory, this is certainly a big area of focus. Is when you speak, you certainly want to engage and connect with your audience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Fred. In fact, That was the main reason I started Teach the Geek. It was me working as an engineer, not being all that great at it, getting a lot better at it, and now working with people like myself. And I think you're absolutely right. They hear my story and they think, well, that was me too. I mean, it would be, frankly, it would be quite weird for me to, for my target audience to be outside of that group because I have no clue what they go through. So, I mean, what would I tell them? A bunch of salespeople. Well, I'll tell them how to become better speakers. I never sold anything in my life. Although I guess suppose I do that now with Teach the Geek, working to sell what I do with Teach the Geek. But before that, I never worked in sales, so I don't have that credibility. At least in my mind, I don't have that same credibility as I'd have with other engineers like myself. So it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense why you're going after the group that the group that you're going after. Also mentioned that you wrote a book. What was the motivation to write your book?
Yeah, the book I wrote is about mortgage note investing. That's my main area of business. The motivation was there wasn't a good resource available for people that wanted to learn just the basics. Learn the basics. How does it work? How can an individual person invest in mortgage notes and buy mortgage notes? It's not just for banks and hedge funds, right? It's something, there's a secondary market where it's accessible to everyone. And furthermore, there's all kinds of great strategies like using your retirement account to buy mortgage notes or invest in real estate. There's all these great strategies that people just don't know about, and they're available to them, but they're not spoken about. They're not spoken about. You don't learn about it. And so you have to seek the information out. And I wanted to bring that to a wider audience. That was a big part of the motivation for writing the book.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense, and especially if you're speaking to a certain group and they don't have that background and they want a primer on what they can do. They can research, they can read your book and then think, well, okay, this guy makes sense. Let me follow him even more and maybe work with him otherwise. And
Yeah.
so the book very well could be that entry point into your whole ecosystem. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. In fact, I wrote a book as well for that same reason. Yeah, I mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier that when I started Teach the Geek, it was based on my own struggles giving presentations. I had to do that on a monthly basis in front of management. And those first few presentations weren't, well, they're pretty rough. They're rough. They're pretty rough, right? So
Ha-
I certainly
yeah.
got
Did you
better at
not
it.
like it when
I
you had
mean,
to do it?
it wasn't a fact of liking it or not liking it. I just didn't put a whole lot of emphasis into it. I didn't think it was that important. Actually, it was my project getting canceled because that was really the catalyst to think, well, maybe this is something I need to get better at. And so I did. But when it comes to you giving presentations or public speaking generally, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Yeah, I was definitely always good at it. Um, I was really good being in front of the customer, whether it was a technical audience or non-technical. I was good at explaining complex concepts to the audience wherever they were from, right? Whether it was a group of engineers or maybe it was a mixed audience in the company. And I always excelled in any role that I had that had a customer facing component. And I definitely saw other peers of mine that they were not good in front of a customer. They couldn't handle situations, stressful situations, right? Especially those of us that are engineers dealing with customers. You might be the guy that gets sent out to fix a problem at a customer site where there's a system or equipment that's not working the way it was supposed to, and there's problems that need to be addressed. So for a company that is a vendor or manufacturer, they need to send the right people in there that know how to get the problem resolved and maintain a good customer relationship. It's very important. And so I had many roles like that, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I want to touch back on something you said earlier, Neil. You said that you weren't in a sales role. You said that a little earlier. And maybe you weren't in the traditional sense. You weren't a member of the sales team and getting a commission on every sale and all of that. However, all of us, every single one of us, whatever walk of life we're in a sales role because you're either selling yourself, you are selling, maybe you're selling a product or service in the traditional sense. But what about if you're working and you're selling your idea, your plan in a conference room to a group of your peers, trying to convey the idea that, hey, I have a solution for this problem. This is a great way to go. No one has anything else better. And now you have to convince your team, maybe your management folks, to adopt this plan, to make these changes. And so you are in a sales role, but it's you're selling your idea, your thoughts, your concepts, or selling yourself. Every job interview you go on, you are selling yourself. You're conveying your skills and abilities to the decision makers that are there to pick who's the next person that's the right fit for this role. And the better you are at communicating and conveying thoughts and ideas, that's going to go a long way towards your success.
Yeah, I definitely can see it that way. And who knows, maybe that's the reason my project got canceled because I wasn't looking at it as a sales role in terms of selling the senior executives on the importance of the project that I was working on. A lot of those presentations were just data dumps and me just thinking, well, they understand, they must understand because I understand. But that's not how it goes. And especially if you're talking to non-technical people, they very well may not understand. And in
Yeah.
looking back on it now, this is 15 plus years ago. What made me even think that they would understand? I mean, there's been instances where I've been in an audience and someone is using a whole lot of words that I don't understand. And so I've been in that situation. So why wouldn't I think that other people would be in that situation when I'm the one giving the presentation? Because I guess sometimes we really don't see we don't really see the issues that we could be potentially causing but it's easy for us to see when other people are causing those same issues.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What comes to mind is that old maxim about walking a mile in the other person's shoes, putting yourself in their place, and helping that shape your experience.
Yeah, 100%. When it comes to the presentations that you do, Fred, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's really planning out at a high level what are the main bullet points? What are the main ideas you want to convey? Maybe you have three main points, and then you can break those down appropriately, build out your presentation, whether it's using a slide deck or you're speaking through it, whatever the method is that's appropriate, and then you put an introduction and a conclusion at the end. That is the basic framework. You have that skeleton, so you start with that, and then you build it out, you expand. Maybe you say, hey, one of these points we're not going to have time for, or it's not so important, so maybe we'll trim it out, and that's fine. And that's how you shape and form your presentation material. Because first of all, you're not going to have an unlimited amount of time to present, right? If you're speaking at a conference, an industry conference in front of your peers, most likely there's a full docket for the whole day and you have a time slot, whether it's 1 hour or 30 minutes, whatever that is, and you have to stick to that. And there's also surprises that come up, right? As a speaker, this has happened to me many times where you're planning on, hey, I'm going to have 1 hour to present. This is the time. But then when you get there, and you're about to go up on stage, the organizer says, hey, there's been a change, some things shifted around on the schedule, and you don't have an hour anymore. You're only going to have 20 minutes. And you're right about to go on stage. So you better figure out quick what adjustments you're going to make so that you can deliver a good presentation, a good talk in the limited amount of time that you have, and convey the important points and deliver the message you want and add value to audience. Because what good is it if an audience is there giving you their time and attention and they're not receiving value from it? And so those are the important things to keep in mind with planning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Fred. Especially now I think about it, there have been many instances, at least when I've been in at conferences, and someone is given a certain amount of time to present, but what ends up happening is they go overtime because maybe they didn't practice
Yeah.
sticking to time. So yeah, they were given 30 minutes. So 35 minutes in, they're still talking. So now the next person that's going to present, they're going to have less time, or at least
Yeah.
they're supposed to have less time. But maybe they're thinking, well, no, I'm supposed to have 30 minutes too. So they're going to go over. So now the whole agenda is thrown off kilter because one person decided to go over time. It's
It
really
is.
it's disrespectful to the audience and to the organizers when
It
people
is. So don't you ever be that guy
do.
that
Indeed.
did that. Yeah, that's super important. Be conscious and have an awareness of your timing, and be ready to make adjustments. And you don't want to be the one that creates a nightmare for the conference organizer, the event planner that has to manage that schedule,
Yeah, especially
right?
if you're
Because all it takes is one person to throw the whole thing off track.
Yep, especially if it's around lunchtime. Now I'm really mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do you ever get nervous before giving a presentation, Fred? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I don't get nervous. No. Um, I would describe it more as a feeling of an adrenaline. You feel adrenaline, your heart rate goes up. It's an excitement. And if you lean into that and transmute that in energy, that emotion into your talk, that's really good energy. That's going to engage your audience. And if someone is nervous, I would say it's a matter of practicing. The more you practice, the better you get, right? If you are speaking on a podcast, the first time you do it is going to be probably quite lousy. But then the second time you do it, it's a little bit less lousy. And then the third time, a little less. And so on and so on. And so repetition and keep getting up and out there, getting those uh, opportunities at bat. The more reps you have, each one you improve. And that's the way it is. No one was born with these great abilities to orate and to present and speak. We all start from where we are. We all start from somewhere. And the way to get better is repetition and practice.
Yeah, 100%. Last question, Fred. For the people who are listening or watching our conversation, and mostly it's technical people, and they have that question, why should I get better at giving presentations, or why should I get better at public speaking? What would your answer be to them?
My answer would be that no matter what role you have, what line of work you're in, whether you are communicating with colleagues at work in a professional environment or communicating at home with your family, the skill of communication is something that is going to serve everyone, everyone. And we all have room for improvement. every time. And so it's a skill to constantly focus and refine and get better at little by little each time.
Yeah, practice makes progress, 100%. This has been a great conversation, Fred. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Thank you, Neil. Best way to get in touch with me is to visit my website, which is fredmoskowitz.com. And if you would prefer a little bit easier of a spelling, you can go to giftfromfred.com. It'll take you right to my website. And once you're there, you can connect with me. You can send me a message or learn more about my online community, learn more about my book, or learn about investing. I always love connecting with people and building relationships because it's one of the most important things that we can do.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.